Hello and welcome back to Boundless and Bottomless. You'll notice there's only two of us today because one of us is now working at a time that we normally record. Nor are we doing what we normally would like to do, which is to pull up the Dugan book and go through it systematically. In fact, what we may be doing is changing that. So we promise to finish a chapter or maybe two every episode from here forward. And we're going to try to record some as soon as Jason gets stable. A lot of us are having changes in our life right now, so it might be a little while. We just wanted to let you know that we are still doing this, even though we haven't now done it for 6 months.
What you mean? Sean gets stable?
Huh?
You mean Sean?
No, you too. You're moving.
Oh, right. Yeah, that's true. I am. That's hilarious.
Sean's also got to get stable because Sean, for those of you who don't know, had a stroke in November or December. I can't remember if it was late November or early December. And it was a minor stroke. He's fine. And now he's back to work, but his schedules and stuff has become a lot more onerous and he has to rest a fair amount. So he will be coming back. And I wouldn't be mentioning this if you didn't give me permission to talk about it. I had a cancer scare, which means that's also stuff we put off. And I have now got a clean bill of health, but I'm having my own stuff, and we're all very busy. But conversely, I think talking about right-wing philosophy is more important. I'm just not sure that Dugan is the most important person to be talking about right now. I mean, if you finished the book on your own, I think for like your second time, and I have skimmed it for like my fourth time, and I both. How do I say this? It's Dugan's book seems smart on a superficial read and dumber the more you read it slowly.
Yeah. I feel like what I've dealt with, I don't know how to put it. What I keep coming back to with Dugan is I'll read it and I'll think like, this is really interesting. Oh, this is actually useful. Then a little bit later I go, only in that one part. Now I'll read more. I'll have to go through that with every chapter, with every book, because now I've got The Great Awakening versus the Great Reset, Templars of the Proletariat, a couple of other books, and like there is useful stuff in there, but it's couched in so much. It's like drowning in it's bad stuff. So I just, I want somebody else to write these things that's much more useful.
I mean, my problem with Dugan is like it presents itself as systemic, but it's not. And it's so eclectic that like there's insights in it. But there's also straight up insanity, and there's also basically Alex Jones through the most obscurantist Derrida-esque means, all at the same time.
It's like Tex Mars level of conspiranoia, and then like Derrida level philosophical gems. I was like, oh, that's cool. I'm glad that that's in there. I just wish I didn't have to read the preceding page or two to get that sentence.
Yeah, I mean, seriously, I think about that time I read Derrida and I realized that of grammatology was basically two sentences of Heidegger stretched out to 400 pages. And that's how I often read, and also it indicates that even though progressives and leftists loved Derrida when I was in my 20s, they don't anymore.
I don't think they know him now.
No. That actually deconstruction as conceived by Derrida was profoundly reactive. I wouldn't say reactionary. I don't actually think it was politically reactionary, but it was profoundly reactive and came out of a fairly conservative worldview.
Reactionary in the way that people generally say that without knowing what it means. They say, "Oh, I don't want to be reactionary. I don't want to react," but not reactionary in the sense of what that word actually means, not politically speaking.
So I'm going to get this out pretty quickly. For those of you who follow this channel, you often know that I often sound a little bit out of date, particularly lately, because we tend to record about 2 months ahead of time. So sometimes I'm saying something and there's been 4 Rand Corporation papers since I said it. And I have read them and I no longer agree with what I said back then. Most famously, though, this happened between you and I on our Decadence review where it's just me and you, and we were talking about Joe Biden staying in the race. And literally by the time we released it, which was only about 3 weeks away, everything we had said was already wrong.
Yeah, we're living in one of those years where everything feels very sped up. Like it's if we take a month to release something, we're already out of date. We're already behind the times.
But I want to push back on that a little bit. Not that I disagree with you. I think if you remember that you're releasing things slow, you actually start having to be more careful about what you say.
Yeah.
I'll give you an example. There's people pushing back on me for me saying that the interest in AOC and Bernie were good, even though I didn't go into that. I didn't think that any, even at the time, and I recorded this in, I think probably in like January and released it now, that even at the time that I have like thought that most of what these AOC Bernie rallies have done is focus everything on Bernie and AOC, making it very individually personalistic, making it largely about, frankly, Bernie's own political mythology. Frankly, Josh Hawley is giving insurance companies a harder time than Bernie these days. And Bernie is not, one of the things that a friend of mine pointed out, he's not even using union labor at some of these rallies. Conversely, though, I've seen this new gaggle of, how do I say this? Let 1,000 Catherine Lou's float. By that I mean a lot of people really focusing in on like talking to the proletariat and speaking, not talking to cultural elites and not talking to the quote PMC unquote. And whenever I look up these people, they're always art influencers in LA who seem to be putting on a proletarian costume to get back at their colleagues who are mean to them in publishing or academia.
Yeah.
And
it's funny, I don't know a lot of like electricians who talk about the PMC.
No, PMC talk is PMC on PMC violence, even if it's true. Like,
yeah.
And I'm not sure it's always true, because I've started really looking at the statistics for who does what and where. And I think it's really easy to get swept up in a lot of false counter narratives right now. One, for example, that I think comes out a lot is, all the peace talks in regards to Trump and either Gaza or Ukraine, quote, favoring Russia or favoring this, that, and the other. And when you actually look at it, it seems to be somewhat similar foreign policy as to what Joe Biden would have done, but in much more unstable and incoherent ways.
It's amazing actually that tends to be, generally speaking, just how the Trump phenomenon boils down to in its essence. It's just, Joe Biden or Barack Obama or George Bush, but just seemingly, I don't know, it's kind of like it sounds less polished, but it's basically the same thing.
I would disagree with you on domestic policy, but I agree with you on foreign policy.
Okay, that's true. I think the domestic policy, that there's in Trump too, there's definitely some more volatility. It's not nearly as much status quo.
Right. Although, as I say that, I also think we can overstate it as black swans too. Like these are accelerations where the acceleration of what is going on changes the kind of thing that it is. We've known that there's been bloat in the administrative state for a long time, but the way it's accelerated has changed what's at stake and the way it's being dismantled. We've known that we are in a post-neoliberal area, but what we've actually learned is post-neoliberalism is just hyper-neoliberalism in one country, which is not viable. It's not a viable policy, which we're learning also really fast. So we get swept up in all the market talk and this, that, and the other, or whatever dumb thing Trump's throwing out today, and we miss the forest for the trees a lot of the time. And I also think we are seeing, fucking finally, but I don't know if it's good, a realignment of right and left. But neither coalition still is anything like coherent.
Yeah. It's not so much necessarily good, but it is possibly different.
Right. I mean, it could be different and worse, but
yeah, that's also true. It's funny. It's very much a case of like, be careful what you wish for, because a lot of people were like, we're gonna shake up things. We're gonna drain the swamp, whatever. It's not necessarily going to be better, but it is going to be different.
I like to think of it as rent seekers on both sides, but it's sophisticated policy wonk rent seekers versus outright griftopian rent seekers. But what's funny about that is that makes it sound like these are from different social classes. This is the same strata of elite on both sides of this equation.
Yeah.
The non-elite elements have been in Trumpism and in Obama Bidenism, which I kind of considered almost one thing, to be progressively closed off. And I mean, I got in trouble with an audience for saying that I don't consider the Harris campaign to be a significant difference from the Biden campaign. And people got mad at me for that. And they're like, well, Biden didn't lose. And I'm like, well, it was his vice president and his reason why we didn't have a primary and his fucking regime that was tied to Kamala Harris. I don't see why you don't see that as an extension of Biden.
Wait, is that really the only reason? Because he didn't.
That's the only reason I got, because technically Harris was not running the Biden campaign. And I'm like, well, it feels like she didn't really pivot from him either.
I mean, very directly and explicitly, and actually at Biden's not request, insistence. So like, it was by Biden's own admission, it was very much an extension of his presidency into this next campaign. It was very obviously and very directly the same.
So I mean, here's what I was. People have often read my guests, and me being kind to my guest is me endorsing my guest. So I want to make it clear to everyone. No, Virginia, I don't think the Bernie Sanders AOC rallies are actually good. Yes, I actually do think it indicates that the tides are shifting, and I also think you should quit that. Communists should quit pretending that they know what everyone involved is thinking, because they are often making shit up to justify their own priors, which is that nothing ever changes and they always lose, but it's not their fault.
Right.
It is your fault, by the way, if you're listening. It's absolutely your fucking fault. We don't have any power. Yeah, you're why we don't have any power. So am I, but also many of you tell yourself stories so you don't have to deal with the hard realities of your politics one way or the other. You and I are really, what I'm really finding interesting right now, though, is it feels like when we talk about right-wing politics, no matter what right-wing politician I pick, our right-wing thinker that I pick right now, we're going to be talking about something that's in some ways already dead.
Yeah.
Because conservatism and reactionary thought is going through a major shift in content, and actually is openly being contended under the nose of Donald Trump as we speak. Like what this is going to be.
That's actually really part of the reason why I think the Dugan is maybe not the most immediately prescient, like in terms of like timeliness, but I think that Dugan is an important thinker to really contend with, because Dugan represents a wildly distinct, different kind of thinking philosophically, and and because right-wing thought and conservative thought is so stuck in one place and it's contested. Dugan represents part of that contestation.
Yeah, it's a spear. It's a weird spear. I would say it's an outer limit of contestation. Yeah. When we started talking about it, we were talking about left-wingers who were attracted to it and why they may be. We've already seen that come and go, I think. A lot of people who hook themselves up to thermostatic politics being anti-systemic, and I'm going to do a video on this so people understand what I mean there. have really misunderstood what thermostatic politics is. Thermostatic politics is common in a democracy, particularly when nobody can deliver policy results. Not that people vote by policy results either, but they do actually care about them. So when there's no policy results to tie things to, you get into reactive narratives, right? And they can swing wildly, and they can seem anti-systemic, but they're not. You are swinging between poles in an already established form, and you take the movement of people responding to dissatisfaction with policy as a sign that there's a mass movement out there ready-made for you. And the thing is, it is actually something you could take advantage of if you tried instead of just whining all the fucking time. But it's not something that actually indicates strong anti-systemic breaks in the general public with whatever politics is at hand.
Right.
And
We
I
haven't
think
seen
a
a
lot.
real anti-systemic break within the general public in kind of a long time now.
I don't think we've seen them in the anti-systemic breaks though in the general public only happen when things are really, 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 really bad. And we haven't really lived through a really, really, really bad time. I mean, there's been pretty bad times. I think the 2000s were actually a really bad time. It's been weird. I've been going back and revisiting like liberal and conservative talking points from the years 2000 to 2005 and realizing like how fucking bad and dire it really was. And there's also a way in which people respond to liberals that instead of actually coming up with their own politics or their own responses, they basically retro engineer a reason to tail the side that the other side isn't tailing. So you pick up right-wing talking points as a response to people picking up democratic talking points, but you're still actually within a system and you are just thermostatically reacting. And whether or not it's siding with Bernie or siding with Trump, a lot of times what you're doing is foregoing any actual political agency on yourself.
Yeah.
And the reason why I would do a show. Go ahead.
The most traumatic way that they can conclude would be like something like what happened in Greece in 2015.
Getting played by Syriza.
Yeah. And speaking as a person who was one of them, who was very, very enthusiastic, but like to the point of tears, like was just so happy and so sorrowful because of what was happening in Athens, what was happening around me. Like I know what it feels like to think that you're on the verge of, I don't know, history.
Yeah, like a lot of people did during BLM before it was instantly recuperated.
Yeah, or like a lot of people did during Occupy, or during any number of things.
Maybe I'm just too Adamadic, but I never feel like I'm on the verge of history.
Well, I don't anymore. I'm 40 years old now. But this is why I keep I continually find some basic reason to revisit and to extol the theses of Du Bois. It's like, for better and for worse, we really live in an era which is everything is spectacle, everything is spectacular, but there's nothing that really, even whenever it feels like it really manifests something new, there's never anything that really actually is distinct, new, anti-systemic. Not yet.
Well, and even the anti-systemic stuff is often forced on nation states. It's not something that they ask for.
Yeah.
Like the Democratic People's Republic of Korea did not ask for the Soviet Union to collapse or to be isolated. Yeah. The Cuba did not ask for a almost half century long embargo. Nor did they ask for China to ask them to float their currency and start using a liberalized currency regime and introduce more capitalist elements to their system, which, by the way, China did do. So it's, the narratives that most people tell themselves to be comfortable are dangerous, and that includes that conservatives are always stupid, which is what I wanted to bring it into this conversation. Because one, yes, I realize that the average conservative talking point is fucking hilariously dumb. I mean, like, it is.
Yeah.
But when you're dealing with people who have a worldview of inequality and they don't think even their base should know everything that's going on, that's actually that's actually a strategic mistake that plays into their hands, that you assume that everybody involved is stupid because the public manifestation seems so dumb. But that's like, in a way, that's almost a deliberately factored in distraction. Like,
Right.
and I do think, and this is not to try to steel man the right. I mean, if I wanted to, like, if I really believed the right was correct on everything, I'd just be a fucking conservative.
Right, you just become part of the right.
Right. And a lot of the people that I see today, like, I get a lot of very dumb comments ever since I started doing shorts. Because if I am quite honest with you, it's become clear to me that people under 21 are both very reactionary if they're dudes, but also too fucking stupid to listen to anything that's longer than 60 seconds. And even when they hear the 60-second clips, they don't really understand, like, what's being said. Like, one of the funniest things is people thought I was defending the administrative state and bureaucracies as somehow good, even though it is skilled. And they're like, oh, it's not skilled. I'm like, you can't do it. You can barely fucking type.
You can barely watch a 60-second video.
Right, you clearly didn't even understand the second video and get that you didn't even get all the context because it's a clip.
Yeah. For better and for worse, but mostly for better. I have no idea what that's like because I don't deal with shorts and thus the audience of shorts, which means that
you don't deal with people under 25.
Yeah, usually. And but also, like, this, that's those are the people that are coming up, so
yeah,
they have to be dealt with, and I recognize that.
I'm not sure we have to deal with them. There's tiny generation.
That's true. They are a very tiny generation. They are the opposite of the baby boomers.
Right. They're Gen X's kids, and Gen X had less kids than their parents than the silent generation did, so it's necessarily smaller.
Yeah.
Generation Alpha are the oldest millennials kids and the youngest Gen Xers kids, and they're still under 14, so we don't really know much about them. Although current reports and my own personal experience indicates that they are semi-feral. So, like, and I know I probably sound like a conservative to a lot of people these days. I know I sound like old men yelling at clouds. The greatest responses that I get is when I say that we all live in a world and we don't escape it. And people would be like, well, you think you're better than us. And I'm like, I am also part of the same world as you.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, we do actually live in some kind of society, and you aren't going to escape it by your special pleading. And
it's kind of like whenever I have made reference to being the left wing of capital.
mm-hmm.
I don't mean to say that I represent the real left. It's like, no, I recognize that all of my life has also been in the service of all of the various things I've been involved in have always been the left wing of what already is, the left wing of capital, the left wing of the existing establishment. And it's a lament, it's a lamentation. It's not like I don't feel great about this at all. But I also just exist in the world as it actually is right now.
Yeah. It's I think it's like my critique of populism, which I always actually say populism is always a way to manage people in the moment of the coherence. And so usually what it actually is a counter elite appealing to what it views as a relatively inert mass to get systemic force, to move the thermostat in one direction or the other, and for one class or the other, at the expense of the class that it is mobilizing. So populism is almost always class collaborationist, which also means that it is almost always actually running people towards what is effectively a losing side of an already existing faction within the existing political spectrum. And whether it's right or left populism, they both ultimately liquidate themselves into parties. And I actually find it funny that no one gets mad at right populism for doing that, but they do get mad at left populism for doing that. And I'm like, but that's all they ever were gonna fucking do.
Right.
Like structurally, that's the most likely outcome. I'm not even looking at like psychology or intentions here. This is structurally the most likely outcome unless you're willing to forego participation in immediate politics in a meaningful sense to build up a counter system or an alternate turn of power, which takes a long time to do. Movement conservatism did that for a fucking century before it took over.
Yeah, it really did. Yeah.
And they had counter institutions at every level. And what I normally hear is like, oh, we just don't have millionaires backing us. I'm sorry, leftists, but even some far leftists do. I've seen the PSL's budget. There's millionaires backing them.
I know for a fact that, well, whatever, there are at least a handful of groups, but like the American SWP, I know how much money they had that in sales of properties and liquidation of all kinds of portfolios that kept us all afloat. Like, yes.
The only reason the CPUSA is still around is they have legacy property that's worth millions of dollars.
I mean, I remember at one point, I want to say it was like 99 or 2000. There was inside the People's World when you would like, yes, one of the pages, maybe in the middle, there was always like be sure to include the People's World in your will. It was like a regular part of the appeal was like help keep us funded by joining the ranks of the older generation, which is passing away and leaving us money, because it was very acknowledged at the time that this is just one of the ways in which we maintain this. We maintain our funding because we have money, or at least because you have money.
Right, and we can reinvest it like any capitalist and operate in that system.
Yeah.
Now, what is amazing about that is just how much of that money was wasted. For what exactly? I mean, like that's, to me, it's not, I'm not scandalized that there's money scandals on the left. I'm not scandalized that there are millionaire donors. I'm scandalized that it doesn't amount to shit and it keeps the same people in power in these tiny sectarian groupings that don't succeed at anything around for generation after generation until finally, usually 3 or 4 generations down, they have to like close shop because the overhead on their taxes exceeds their income, even from relatively valuable properties.
Yeah.
Like,
I mean, but also like the Socialist Labor Party, I don't know how, there may be a dozen people, but it still kind of exists. And it's been like a very, very long time since it was a mass organization. I want to say since around 1905.
are we talking about like the Duginists?
Yeah.
Yeah, they think
when you have money, you can survive for a very long time.
I think they folded most of their holdings like after 100 years.
I mean, I might be wrong. I might be out of date. They might actually have closed up shop, but if they did, it was very recently.
It was recently. I think it was in the teens if they did at all. I don't know, actually. I know that they actually had to lose some of their buildings finally, but that's about it. Wait, the SWP USA still technically exists.
Yeah.
So if you think about if we were building those kinds of counter institutions that were not sectarian things to keep a few ideologues in charge on some kind of slate vote forever.
Yeah, basically to keep them from having to find jobs.
Right. Then we'd probably do a lot better. We don't complain about the Heritage Institute and the Institute for American Progress and all those groups, which are also similarly think tanks with individual donors like this, because they're more interested in power in a raw sense than ideological complacency.
Right.
The right actually does have like successor organizations and this, that, and the other. So many left-wing organizations, ironically, are so instituted and built around single individuals that when those individuals eventually die, those organizations are just kind of lost, but they can exist as zombie organizations for generations and still not do a damn thing from their high point when they had a Connolly, if you're USSWP, or Cannon, excuse me, Connolly's the Irish guy. Cannon for if you've USSWP. The Becker family, if the Becker family gets ripped out in the PSL, they just die of old age or whatever, and they're not any successors. What's going to happen to the PSL? All right. We're seeing them start sending the money. What's going to happen to the PSL? The DSA is way more volatile because it's actually funded by its fucking membership for good or ill, but it really is. It doesn't have millionaire patrons, which is actually kind of weird.
Yeah, because you would think that it would. If any of these institutions actually seems as though they would have this kind of a guard, this kind of break against this kind of check on their fortunes, it would be the DSA. But it's actually, I think, for good, not really for ill. It actually is member funded. There are other things for ill, for sure, but not that. I think that's a good thing.
The amount of money the DSA gives to overhead and to non-elected leadership and NGOs downstream of it, and the fact that it wastes money, tons of money. I mean, people don't know this. It wastes tons of money on relatively ineffective campaigns outside of New York and California. Those are the only places where it's particularly effective. And it's because it doesn't have the kind of money to protect its electeds when they do get elected either.
Right.
So as opposed to like the PSL, which I don't know if it has the kind of money to actually protect its electeds, but it does have the kind of money to get, their candidates on most state ballots, which is actually really expensive. It takes millions of dollars to do. And they run media operations that have $1 million budgets. That's like public knowledge. Breakthrough News is the PSL front, and it has an over $1 million budget. So, and I say this because I want people that when they tell me, oh, the left loses because of lack of money, and I'm just like, it's just not true. You don't have as much money. We don't have the Mercers. George Soros isn't giving us the money that.
We don't have like Koch brothers money.
We don't have Mercer's money, Koch brothers money, stuff like that. Although the Mercers and the Koch brothers are actually at odds with each other and what they advocate on the right. So, but we do have relatively well off. I mean, patrons. It's just, I don't think these people are actually interested in winning in their domestic context. This stuff, I think, has knock-on effects for other things. I can't prove that. But I think it's interesting to look at the way the right funds itself and the ideologies of the right, because you can start, if you go back and look at the left and really look at it, you can start seeing that not only is the left captured in obvious ways, like the AOC and Bernie are going to keep people in a Democratic Party, and that it's also a kind of, frankly, at this point, narcissistic, personalistic Bonapartism that's failed. I mean, in what ways is Bernie significantly different than any other progressive narcissist like Dennis Kucinich?
Right. I mean, at least you could at least consider a Bonapartism based on, I don't know, some kind of metrics of success.
But when leftists come to me and say, oh, this is just going to trace all these people back into the Democratic Party, and I want to go, well, what the fuck are you doing other than whining about it?
Right. I mean, first of all, back in the Democratic Party would
they never left.
That there was somewhere else for them to go.
Right. Where the fuck are they going to go?
Right.
And when you have them tail the right, you're just tying them into the GOP. Nobody's actually advocating for an actual independence politics in this goddamn scenario that has any power. I mean, maybe the Green Party, but barely. I mean,
yeah, no, not really. I've spent enough time because of Green Party campaigns and being on the staff for it. Right? I don't want to speak too ill of the Green Party, but ramshackle is a good term. I think it's a very ramshackle operation, and I don't believe that it has the capacity to be what it wants to be.
It suffers from a kind of dual problem in my mind, and this goes all the way back to Comejo being involved. It is a low demand political formation. Unlike, say, the PSL or the CPUSA or most Trotsky SF, which are medium to high demand political organizations, they require you to make sacrifices.
Yeah.
Being a Green member is just something you can register as. You don't
Yeah.
have to do anything. Even counting Green Party members, like what I always count is Green Party donors, because that's a closer thing to someone who has an actual stake in the organization. And that's like 8,000 people. You know, but then people will tell me, oh, but the cadre organizations. And I'm like, but the thing is, you're up against electoral parties that aren't cadre organizations. The Democratic Party is not a cadre organization.
Yeah.
Like, it's a legislative initiative mass membership organization that you're in certain states required to register to participate in primaries.
Right.
So, like,
that's not a universal.
No, it varies from state to state.
Right.
Like, when I was in Georgia, I didn't have to and I never did register as any party. I would pick whatever. I could only pick one primary ballot, but I could pick whichever one I wanted. Yeah, I often picked either the Reform Party or the Green Party back in the day, but nonetheless.
Right.
And they also don't understand that what they put these people up to do. Like, if I had this conversation with Gene Badgelon. Is AOC supposed to do the left Tea Party thing, which is actually what is advocated by Marx as what any electoral politician should do, which is just obstruct? Or do you want her to deliver on positive goods like semi-socialized medicine or at least a single payer option
or something,
something like that? Because those are different goals. Those are radically different goals. Do you want her to make compromises to get legislation and policy passed, or do you want her to obstruct bad policy? Those are different things. You have a hard time doing both. Ask any former Tea Party person when they have to pivot to doing positive politics as opposed to negative politics, how it goes for them. Like,
yeah, like, other than Rand Paul, like, I don't think that there's a single. I mean, the Freedom Caucus doesn't. I mean, it exists, but doesn't really do anything that justifies it existing.
No. And Rand Paul is like the only person who isn't just subsumed to whatever the GOP politics de jure is of the moment.
Yeah.
I mean, one of the things about the Tea Party is even its founders thought it was astroturfed. But my thing is, like, we don't admit when liberal and left-wing things are equally astroturfed. Like, no one was saying that. And I don't think early BLM after the Floyd nor early BLM after Ferguson was astroturf, but I do think within a month they were.
Yeah, it was demonstrably different. If you were paying attention, you could tell. It felt different.
It followed that weird pattern starting in the mostly black, mostly deindustrial areas of the upper Midwest, and ends in the highly unequal but very white and relatively very rich areas of the liberal coastals. I mean, literally how both times it moved from like St. Louis and those kind of areas out into New York and Seattle and Portland.
Yeah.
And those are very different demographics of people. And then we started seeing, DEI. I mean, there's a way in which these are mutually constitutive feedback loops that leftists often don't understand. So, for example, Trump is going after civil rights legislation by calling it DEI. But what leftists do not recognize, and I'm not saying it's their fault for this, but they defended DEI too by pretending it was just the same thing as like 60s civil rights legislation and not super corporate and tied in the CRT, which is also not just anti-racism.
Right.
So why should they be surprised when they actually set up the defense of these things by claiming it was the older thing when it flips around on its head? And then they're like, oh, they're attacking DEI and undoing civil rights legislation. I hear this talking point today, and I'm like, but you linked the two things together, and they never really were.
Yeah, I mean, I think, well, whatever. I say this all the time. Just, if you don't have an independence, you're always, and just like we are right now, we're always going to be pushed and pulled and dragged behind. And sometimes we're going to celebrate it. We're going to think we're doing something else, but we're going to be tailing, but that's it. Whatever we call what we're doing, until it's actually independent, it is definitely just tailing.
But I guess that brings us back to someone like Dugan. Dugan's interesting to me because there is insight in there, but he's also a guy that you and I both read the exact words where he says to his audience verbatim that he's gonna fifth column Marxist left. He just says it outright. Like, it's not hidden. It isn't a conspiracy. It's stated. Now, he's not, I mean, honestly, he's actually not very good at it. It's not hard to fool the Marxist left.
No, it's really not.
It's really not. All I have to do is retro-engineer anti-communism to anti-communism, and I can get people to believe almost anything. Because they don't know how to read sources critically. They don't know, like, they'll replace one line with another. And you know what, like for example, my big pushback on people, like, I'm not particularly anti-Stalin, but I do get tired of like Stalin won World War II, and I'm like, yeah, he did, absolutely, but he's also why the Wehrmacht could invade Russia in the first place.
Right.
That's undeniable.
There's a version of history, not that it's super useful for us to try to go down this path, but if we are trying to make sense of what has happened, we have to wonder what would happen if Stalin didn't do a bunch of things that made World War II happen. It made it possible. These eased the possibility.
Like, what if he had maintained third periodism instead of moved to the Popular Front? What if he, because I mean, we were talking about this, we were talking off air, like you would celebrate a renewed Marxist-Leninism, but was like Marxist-Leninism in the 30s, when I was like, well, Marxist-Leninism in the 30s was fucking bad in Europe, but it was actually pretty good in the United States, and it was because of third periodism foreclosing allegiance with the Democratic Party.
Right, exactly.
And in 1936, that all changes. But the thing that makes this really difficult to talk about is we also have to admit that the period in which the CPUSA was the largest that it ever was the Popular Front. But did it matter that it was that large is the question? Or was it simply, at that point, a wartime adjunct of the Democratic Party, effectively? Like,
yeah, and I think that there was a lot of hope that turned out to be not realistic. That that posture, that position could be just set aside, the same as the old one. Like, once the war ended, everything would change again. But it's not what happened. It's that's still not what has happened. They're still kind of wed to this very, very, at this point, very failed. What do I want to call this? I don't even want to call it a strategy, because that would say a lot more than I think that needs to be said. I think it's, well, whatever, a failed strategy at best. It's a failed strategy at best.
but I guess this leads me to another question. What are our false assumptions? Like, if, like, for example, I think a lot of people lie to themselves about the right, that it's full of idiots or immoral people or whatever, and that's all kind of irrelevant. And also it's not true. And there are, like, one of the weirdest things I hear is like left liberal attacks on Josh Harley, and I'm like, he seems to be the only populist who actually believes what he fucking says, which is weird. I mean, I admit that it's weird, and that there's a bunch of reactionary shit that he believes about the family and whatnot, but he does actually go after, like, I don't know, United Healthcare in a way even Sanders doesn't.
Yeah.
And what do we make about that? Like, everyone seems to think that's insincere, and I'm like, well, clearly his faction thought they had influence over Trump, and they don't. Like,
yeah, that's the Bannon conundrum.
Yeah.
And
Bannon's like, I mean, at this point, almost to use a vulgar phrase, almost like a cuck of history, because he keeps on trying to justify, his right-wing workerism in light of what Trump keeps doing, and still maintaining like Trump's eternal, Bonapartist credentials, as it seems pretty obvious that none of that shit's going to happen.
Yeah, Bannon to Trump is a lot like, it's like Maoists in the 80s. It's like talking about something which is not happening, and talking about how any minute now they're going to pull the wool off your eyes, and they're going to flip the switch. Now China's going to be revolutionary. It's like, no, this is just, at this point you're entertaining delusion, and you're
sheepdogging.
Yeah, your missteps are your own at this point. You're no longer being misled. You are doing this all on your own.
I mean, in this sense, Bannon and Bernie are similar figures.
Yeah.
They're like mirror images of each other, except that Bernie actually has a senatorial career and Bannon's still just an outside pundit who's brought out to like assure the troops or whatever, or keep part of the populist end of the Trump coalition aligned. But it's pretty clear that Trumpism is not that at all. Not now. I mean, it was plausibly deniable in Trump 1 because Trump 1 was frustrated, but Trump 2 is not frustrated. It seems to be more chaotic, actually.
Yeah, but Trump 2 is, as an administration, is much more secure, much more stable, much more knowledgeable, and it controls all three houses.
Right.
And so that means that they don't have any more excuses.
Which also means that
kind of like Obama,
right?
In the second administration was the same thing.
And so it's actually points to the lie of the whole thing.
Yeah.
Which I think a lot of people who watch American politics would be made very uncomfortable if you have to deal with the fact that the structures that you see on the other side and the captives that you see on the other side are so similar in structure and how they get sheepdog back in.
Yeah.
Like that. And I think the only thing that makes that not obvious is no one on the right is actually promising an outside movement from the GOP. They're promising to make the GOP whatever thing that they want to make it into. Whereas the left is kind of talking out of both sides of its mouth about what it wants to do, whatever the left is. And I'm not sure we have any idea at this point what the left is so contested that the left of capital is hard to clarify.
I'm not really convinced that there is a distinct left. I think that Bernie Sanders represents the most honest and accurate understanding of the moment. When I say the moment, I mean like the last 50 years. And I don't mean Bernie Sanders in the last 50 years. I mean Bernie Sanders in the last 20 years. Because unlike, like, I was in the ISO for way too long. And I really thought, very delusional, I really thought we were doing something counter-systemic. Bernie Sanders, when he was running for president and ever since then, is just dealing with this as it actually is, dealing with the moment in without any illusions. So I respect him. I don't agree with him, but I respect him because at least he's no longer, or at least he's not pretending to be oppositional to the Democratic Party. He's talking about trying to save it, make it whatever. But at least he's, honestly representing the left of what actually exists.
The thing is, everyone talks about needing like a mass workers' party and all that, and I don't disagree with them.
No, I think let's do it.
Yeah, well, but also how the fuck are you going to do it? Because you don't just do it by calling it into existence. All that does is create a sect. You don't just do it by coming up with a program on your own with your 100 friends and calling that like a program for the working class because of some ideological clarity that you may or may not have. That's not how that comes about either.
Well, and let's be honest, don't have it.
Right.
In reality, if you had that kind of ideological clarity, you
wouldn't be positing that kind of program at that moment. Like,
exactly right. I mean, this is why I have put in a lot of time in the Sanders moment. At this point, it's a long time past, but I wanted to find some way to do something different, just see what actually happens. Turns out nothing, but
I mean, for me, my great fear, and I don't think I talk about this enough. My great fear is that Stanislav Lem is right, and that political change is actually just stochastic. That no one's actually developing towards anything. Like, it's one meaningless event after another.
I mean that I would say that's true. At least I think I agree with that. At least it has been that way, and kind of for a long time. My fear is that it's how it will be, because I don't know. I mean, I haven't lived long enough to see anything different. But
Well,
I don't just mean in my lifetime. I mean, like, I think that since the Second World War, we're kind of still in the same doldrums as we have been in since the atomic bomb. Just more and more extreme versions of an impasse, which has always felt uncomfortable because it always has been. We just finally are like waking up to the reality, like, oh, we're still in this cul-de-sac. Somehow we just haven't gone out and gone back to something else.
And I guess that leads me to thinking that, like, maybe we do need to take all these ideologies a lot more critically. Like the imminent critique doesn't need to be just the imminent critique of the left from the left, whatever the fuck that is, or of the Democrats from the left. That's a little bit clearer, but even though I'm not sure what that means, like, the Democrats are so self-contested that they're basically dependent on 80-year-olds who are having their last 12 out of power, but who, in their hubris, will die soon. Like, they're way past retirement
shows
age.
us that will happen no matter what.
Right. So, they can fight David Hogg as much as they want to, and they might win this time. They probably will. But
yeah, probably.
They will die. And there's the younger generation is between AOC and Slotkin. Right? So you got Pelosi on the block versus I'm basically a Republican from 20 years ago. But we are in a decadent society. That applies across the board.
Yeah, and the decadence is not a new phenomenon. It's very, very advanced. It's like a cancer which is well past being treatable.
So, a lot of people take solstice as, take solace in their ideologies, getting to see past it. But then I asked them, okay, so you're right. Bernie and AOC are sheepdogging. Whether they mean to be or not is irrelevant. Although, and I do think people should be a little bit more suspect in what they ascribe as known motives to people. But in this case, I think we can assume that AOC at least knows what she's doing.
Yeah.
It also might be good that people are attracted to it, but the thing is, we know that it's not necessarily going to go anywhere. I think we already see it's not going to go anywhere. Yeah. Like, so what do you do about that? Or, for example, that despite, all the talks about being kinder to Russia and, like, basically agreeing to the conditions stated forth, that Russia asked for, about recognition of Crimea and all this, and holding some of the eastern territory of Ukraine being granted by Trump, that on both sides that there's bad faith negotiations there. And that also it's not really as much of a pivot to Russia as a lot of liberals want to make it look like, because they would like to pretend that somehow that Putin and Trump are somehow each other's stooges, where the actual reality of the situation is much more bleak and brutal and is likely for all sides to fuck up. And this is where I think people miss the history of modern warfare. Since World War II, warfare tends to fuck everybody involved in it. There are exceptions, the Vietnamese to some degree, although they had to fight 2 more wars after we left.
And their losses in that war were staggering.
Yes.
Like, it's in a very similar way that similar to the Soviet Union and the Second World War, like the loss of human life and of any infrastructural development is incalculable. Like, it's impossible to know where Vietnam would be today if not for the immense losses that they had to deal with. I mean, they fought the war from like 1953 until like 1979.
Yeah.
They were basically a permanent state of war.
For an entire 2 generations.
Yeah.
You know, first against the French, then against us, then against the Cambodians, and then against indirectly the Chinese.
Yeah. So I mean, we don't know what that's like, and I don't think we can really. I don't think anyone can really understand it. Even they can understand what has happened.
We have had generational wars like that, like Afghanistan, but our generational wars are not high body count for us.
No, not at all.
Right. And I mean, the Soviet Union lost half of its adult population, well, twice. Once in the Civil War, once again in World War II.
Yeah.
And then Russia did during the Soviet period, lost about, I think, a fourth to half of its male population to deaths of despair. Not even a war. Because I think the male lifespan dropped like 15 years very, very quickly.
Yeah, like within, I want to say like within a year.
Yeah, it's just dramatic.
Life expectancy under Yeltsin. And honestly, if you don't understand that, then there's the Putin phenomenon seems to be this weird mystical, like it's just the Russian soul. Just
the Russians are just somehow bad.
Yeah, it's like no. If I was a Russian in 1999, I would be either dead or I'd be in.
If you and I were Russians in 1999, we'd most likely be dead. But
but otherwise, yeah, I
or we would have like ran to the west or something cowardly.
Yeah.
But
well, yeah, that's also true. But like, you know, the fact that there are Putin supporters, enthusiastic Putin supporters,
I think
like
real.
The least remarkable thing the least remarkable, mysterious fact of the contemporary political landscape. It's the one thing I know for sure is that, of course, people would be pro-Putin.
Because any appearance of stability would be good. Any kind of reclaiming of national identity after being humiliated and sabotaged like that would feel pretty good.
Well, yeah, because if you think about like the Soviet period, if you remember any of it, it's the last few years, it's the Gorbachev years. And then Yeltsin is the ultra-liberal period, and like those are your options. And then, or you have Putin. It's like, of course, people are pro-Putin.
Yeah, I mean, you might have a boner for Brezhnev because that's when things seem good. But then, if you think about it too long, you're like, oh, but that led us here. And,
yeah, exactly.
You know, I mean, and we're kind of in a similar position. I've actually made the argument a bunch that Trump is our Yeltsin.
Yeah,
which also indicates that there's something worse on the horizon, and I don't even know which party it's coming from. Like, I think, I feel fairly certain it's not. I feel fairly certain once that Trump is off the political stage, we're going to have probably a decade of chaos. I could be wrong. I don't mean chaos in like the administrative state sense. I mean chaos in like you're not going to know what anyone's ideological constellation really is, because it isn't settled in the GOP, and the Dems are searching for something to replace wokeness, our academic identity politics, and kind of it looks like it's going to be abundance neoliberalism maybe, which
So you're
is
talking about a Democratic Party which is going to be very similar to the way it was in the 1980s.
right.
Just like not, I mean, I can't even think of who are the Democratic politicians from the 80s.
Mondale,
Yeah, okay. A
Gary
Democratic
Hart.
Party of Walter Mondale.
Yeah, which is what, by the way, you had under Biden. Biden was a Mondale. I mean, Mondale's kind of the older form of that. And then you have the Atari Democrats who become like the DLC, the Democratic Leadership Council, from Gary Hart to Bill Clinton. And Hart is a phenomenon that starts with Carter in legislative terms, and then goes up to the 80s to his presidential one, etc. But that was a long project too, because labor was unpopular and kind of dying. The downturn of labor. This is another thing that I mean, like you and I talk about. I think conservatives are actually better on manipulating. And I don't think, and I say manipulating advisedly, labor than we give them credit for. Whereas leftists often take labor leadership, even when it's not rank and file, but even when it claims to be rank and file, as somehow speaking for all its members in a sincere way, which also tells me these people never been in a fucking union.
Yeah.
Because that's rarely true. But
if anything, it's usually the precise opposite.
Right. And we've seen all this ranking file and labor militancy go nowhere, not even into higher density of unions in the labor movement. Like, most shops are small now if they enter labor. And what people are doing online and is basically just like I think a lot of people are retro-engineering anti-communism to anti-communism and think that equals being pro-communism, which it doesn't. I also think that you have a lot of people turning against labor and looking at the fact that labor is very popular and then not being able to answer, if it's so popular, why is it still declining?
Yeah.
And the answer is, well, your models are based on a different labor environment. They're based on an industrial model that even if Trump got his reshoring back, would not look the way that mid-20th century unions do. To put it in perspective, the estimates of if you look at the peak labor force of what it took to run a faculty at their height of employment, that same factory in China only requires 30% of that. And the projections are in America, it would require 15% of that to run.
Right. Like onshoring, the reshoring of production is not
doesn't bring jobs back.
Yeah, it's not even projected as being contra AI and automation, but actually it's because of automation that's even seen as potentially possible at all. So it's just not the same thing.
And so that leads a left that in my mind is just constantly floating around trying to, frankly, conservatively bring back things that there's no infrastructure for. And I started pointing this out with Corbyn. I'm like, Corbyn's model of manufacturing for Britain has not existed since the empire de-evolved.
Right.
It hasn't existed really since the 70s. And there is no way to easily bring it back. You are a fucking island.
Right. There's a reason why Clement Attlee is the last Labour politician to actually significantly bring about anything positive, which is the National Health Service. That was in 1947?
Yeah.
Is that right?
So,
yeah.
Yeah.
So, something like that.
And so what Corbyn had on offer was actually, frankly, a kind of nostalgia. And I get so much pushback from the British soft left on this, but it just seems to be the case. And they were stronger. If I was going to say this, and here's my condemnation of us, Corbyn's program was more sensical than Bernie's.
Oh yeah,
and that and I'm saying that Corbyn's program was effectively impossible.
Right.
What does that say about Bernie's, you dumb motherfuckers? Like, like
I think
Bernie's
that people
not even
just
operating off of one form of political economy. Like, it's half MMT, half classical social democracy, little bits of Marxism.
Bernie's mostly vibes based.
Mm-hmm.
And again, like, I say this as a person who is very unapologetic about having been a Bernie supporter, and like I would really like to believe in Sanders. But I just want to be sober about this. Just recognize there's nothing there. There's just nothing there. It doesn't matter how much I want there to be something there. There just isn't.
So to flip this on its head, and I like to think about, like, this is the dialectical flip of revolutionary pessimism, and I'm untitling this episode "Updates on Revolutionary Pessimism." We'll talk about conservatism later.
Yeah,
but,
I mean, we've said the word conservative a few times, but we haven't really talked
about it.
Yeah.
Is that when you give up hope on stupid bullshit, you can start having hope that you could build the right things.
Right.
I'm not a revolutionary pessimist because I'm pessimist about people, or I'm an ultimate pessimist about change. In fact, when I get excited about something like people coming out to see Bernie, it is not because I think that Bernie is going to do anything or that those rallies fucking matter. It's that you are seeing people discontented in a thermostatic political way with the Democratic Party in a way that would create space for a left to utilize if such a left existed as an independent entity, which it by and large does not in any meaningful way outside of foreign policy. There is a foreign policy left that has some coherence. I'll give the PSL that much credit. They do deserve it. But it's kind of limited to foreign policy. They do not have many domestic policy wins at all. And even they don't have foreign policy wins either. They're just consistently able to show up and protest in a consistent way with a consistent message and consistent propaganda.
Right. As opposition, or I don't know, whatever they can.
They're like a geopolitical opposition, and same way like Ben Norton is. Like, Ben Norton is, I don't love everything he says. I don't always think he's the most acute reader of foreign policy of governments, but he is actually fairly consistent as a kind of counter agitprop. Is it all true? No, but it's mostly true, and so that's the important thing. But I'm also dealing with, increasingly, particularly when you deal in shorts and whatnot, increasingly with people who do not comprehend the situation. And maybe that was always true, but like, I don't think this is about social class or me being some kind of PMC elitist, although I'm occasionally accused of that. Even though, like, I come from one of the most blue collar backgrounds of any left media figure that there is. But I no longer claim to be blue collar, so like, fair. Go ahead, you can say that. That's what you want. I more think that there's general social decay, and that educated liberals sound smarter. They know how to say the right things, but they're just as incomprehensible, really. As the chud reactionaries that you deal with, and their base is being just as manipulated.
Right. And one thing that the last few years should have made very clear to everybody is that the average person doesn't like how indecipherable the educated liberal talking points are. I don't like it.
No, I remember watching. I was at my my in-laws' place, and they were watching Fox News, and I saw like a conservative pundit talk, and I saw someone go respond and accuse RFK Jr. of like systemic racism, and even I'm like, I know what this stuff means, and I don't understand what point you're getting at. Like, it just seems like you're trying to find an obtuse way to call this guy a racist. He may or may not be a racist. I can't tell from anything said. You know, like, and frankly, he's bad for reasons that have nothing to do with that. Like,
yeah, racist or not, that's just not what's actually that's just not what's
that's not it's not what's at stake.
right.
And the one thing you can see is the conservative narrative points, even though they are sometimes just as deceptive, they are more emotionally effectively comprehensible. Like,
yeah, dramatically so.
Whereas, like, you know, even the demographics this was supposedly for have largely turned against a lot of these talking points. You know, like, and so I think liberals more or less realizing that. But what are we seeing it being replaced with? It's being replaced with stuff like the Bulwark. It's being replaced by like the left wing of neoconservatism explicitly coming to terms and being like, well, we'll give you some social democracy if you give us our military back.
And only
you can,
sort of, because even they're getting rid of David Hogg because he's rocking the boat too much.
well, right. And the Bulwark types are actually supporting getting rid of David Hogg. And I'm like, David Hogg's like just a fucking progressive. He's not even
David
like
Hogg is on your team. He's one of your guys.
right.
And we're like, nah, but he's too much like you, even as a person who is entirely in our camp. He's still too much like you.
So I mean, yet there does not seem to be, and I'm going to challenge everyone to think about this, there's not a viable left-wing force outside of the Democratic Party. It does not actually exist. When you're giving yourself a pat on the back for getting 1% of the vote as being, you know, the highest percentage of the vote a communist has gotten since actually they said since World War II, which is not true. Gus Hall and got more. They got up to 2%. But like,
I mean, even what's his name?
William Z. Foster got more than 2%. Debs
Who
got
was
like
the SWP candidate in the 70s, 76, I think. It might have been Camejo. He got like maybe he had about 1%.
he got about 1%. And I think he like tied Gus Hall.
Well, yeah, and Debs twice, and what's Norman
there
Thomas,
you're dealing
right?
with like 16%.
Yeah.
And you're actually dealing in what is it? Is it 1918 where the third parties, if you add the Bull Moose Party and the Socialist Party together, they actually have more than any of the major parties, but they were split amongst the progressives and the socialists.
Yeah, like that's just a different country. It's a different landscape. It's more than just a different moment in history. Every single thing about that is all different.
I mean, Ross Perot almost got what 15% at one point.
Yeah.
But that's the last time that happened. And I want to point out they changed state laws across the board to make sure that Ross Perot never happened again.
And that was when I was 7.
That was when I was 10 or 11. I mean, I remember this happening. That's the thing. I don't think I understood it entirely, even though I was politically active in my teens. You know,
what year was that?
92.
Yeah.
And the law started changing between 92 and 96. This is where there was a lot of state election law reforms. And then that's also when like the Black Congressional Caucus made backdoor deals with conservatives so that they could keep their seats and but suppress Democratic votes and stuff like that. You know. And I know I get in trouble about talking about that too, but it's a fact.
I mean, this is why decadence should be understood as the flip side of it's not just that revolutions are the locomotive of history. There's another way in which,
no, history can get locomotive downward.
Yeah.
Like,
because
things fall apart, motherfuckers.
Like, things don't just go in one direction. So it's not like we're just going to have what we have forever until we make it different. We could always have something worse. It could always degenerate into something unrecognizable, and that we can pine for the glory days of 2025. However absurd it is to say that.
I mean, for me, what I was hoping for in this great confusatron that is this current Trump administration is realignments that were meaningfully independent, and I'm not getting it. I'm just not. And I know people want it. I think when I see people turn to AOC and Bernie, I think that's what they want. Do I think that's what they're going to get? Absolutely not. Even if they won, which I don't think they're going to. I still think there's a fundamental misrecognition between the difference between popularity and actual political leverage. They're not the same thing. Trump has political leverage through popularity, but he had to basically, create a almost mirror world to do it. And we haven't seen that it will ultimately be effective. It seemed effective at first, but it doesn't seem so effective now.
Yeah, it actually seems like within another 3 to 5 months,
we'll be back to normal, whatever Trump won politics was. I don't know that. I'm not betting on that, but it does feel at the current moment that we are heading back to that.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not saying I know for a fact. I'm just saying I feel as though that's likely to be the case.
Right. And that's what keeps on hitting me about these counter-systemic moments that aren't really counter-systemic. Like, I bet you if we were old enough in 1984 to have really been on the Jesse Jackson Rainbow Coalition campaign, that was 84, is that 88? I think it's 84.
I don't know. It was in the 80s sometime.
Well, it was in the 80s enough that I remember it, but not 80s enough that I understand it.
Right.
I don't really start understanding, interesting. The other funny thing about the Rainbow Coalition, you know where the name came from?
Actually, don't.
Came from the Panthers. Yeah, it was 84. Sure. I was right.
The Rainbow Coalition was founded by Fred Hampton.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
It was the Popular Front Coalition movement.
Yeah, wow.
Funny that.
That is bleak. That's what that is. That's not a bad note to end it on.
No, I think we shouldn't hear. The future is what you're going to make it. If you can take advantage of these situations, and there's lots of movement right now on both sides of the aisle that people could take advantage of if we actually had an independent structure to do it. But I can't invent that as a podcaster. You can't invent it as a scholar. We can't do it on our own. And just going, nanny boo boo, we're going to all head back into the Democratic Party. I'm like, yeah, that, of course, duh. What's next? What is next beyond that? Because what I often see is if you're not tailing the left, you're tailing the right. There has not been actual independent stuff going on with any popularity. And I suspect it's because for most people, it is incomprehensible that something that is outside of this immediate spectrum really, truly is incomprehensible to most people, at least emotionally, if not intellectually.
Yeah.
And I even think it's true for us. I mean, you and I are like, nothing ever happens until it does. And even then we don't know if it's good, it's also incomprehensible to us. So I don't want to make it sound like it's just like, oh, we're so much better than you. I see through this. I don't either.
Yeah. There's a reason why I always come back to this turn of phrase with the Owl of Minerva. Later on, it will seem obvious, but it's not obvious right now.
Nope. Right now, I feel like the Owl of Minerva is shitting on our heads. She's like, bloop, 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 bloop. Yeah, I think so. We will be coming back with both series. We are going to start talking about Dugan again. We just wanted to get this one out to make you guys know that we are alive. This program's still going on. Sean's okay. I've done a diving into records once, but it's just, we're all very busy. It's hard to get schedules done, but we are going to get it done. We're going to finish the Dugan book, and then we're going to do something radically different. I don't know what yet. It's going to be conservative, but I'm probably going to pick 5 books and, ask the panels if they would be willing to read them, and take any off that they're not willing to read, and then throw it up for a vote, and then we'll go. But I do think that's where we're at. I'm torn between reading something more normie like George Will, or something that might actually. I mean, I have to say, if we looked at all the alt-right options from like a decade ago, I'm surprised, although I shouldn't be. Actually, it is kind of obvious in retrospect. But again, that Al Minerva thing, that neo-reaction's actually the one that actually had staying power. The reason why we should have saw that is neo-reaction like assuages the petty egos of a bunch of tech millionaires, so it has money, whereas like white nationalism doesn't by itself.
Right, and the tech millionaires, billionaires, whatever, that's their ascendant. They have been for a while, and they're not nearing their crescendo yet.
No, they're not. I do think, however, that like this recent AI boom's about to burst. But that doesn't mean they'll go away. There'll be some new grift after that. And on that note, we'll end on a pessimistic perspective. And we'll stop here.